Hi everybody. Well, I have the privilege of talking about the book of Hosea. Now, and Hosea was the first of the minor prophets. Now, when you think of minor, don't think of the word lesser. Just instead, remember that the books are just a little bit shorter. Even though Hosea has 14 chapters. Hosea was written in the 8th century BC during the reign of King Jeroboam II. And you can read about him in 2 Kings chapter 14. An overview of the book of Hosea starts off chapter 1. Hosea is like so many prophets, and the things that happen to him in his life are then used as a prophetic proclamation to the people of Israel. So in Hosea's case, he is asked by God to go and marry a woman who he knew would be unfaithful to him. This is slightly bizarre and not a call I would have liked on my life, but this is what Hosea did. And he had children with this woman. This woman was called Gomer, if you're looking for baby names. And the children were called Kezreel. And again, these were all had a prophetic proclamation meaning about their name. So the word Kezreel ultimately meant punishment for the people of Israel. Lo Rohama, which meant no mercy for the people of Israel. And finally, Lo Ami, because God was no longer going to call the people of Israel his people. Throughout Hosea, there is this is balance between God's anger and his punishment towards the people of Israel for their continual sinning and disobeying and broken relationship that they have with him. And on the other side, God's promising that he will bring mercy and compassion on the people if they turn back to him. In fact, in verse 10 in chapter 1, it talks about how when the people of Israel come back to him, they will no longer be called no people. Remember, Lo Rahama, no people. They will be called children of the living God. And on that day, there will be a great celebration in Kezreel. So again, turning round the whole idea of punishment and turning it around into celebration. And that's what God does with us, doesn't he? He takes all of the negativity and he turns it around and works it for our good. How good is God? Then in chapter 2, we see what you can either read as being Hosea talking to Gomer, or when you look at it through the context of the children of Israel, God talking to the children of Israel. And we see in this picture a people, whether that's Gomer, whether that's the people of Israel, who have been unfaithful, who have left the safety of and security of what the husband, God, Hosea, is providing, and goes and basically prostitutes themselves. So Gomer became a prostitute. I don't believe she was a prostitute straight away. She became a prostitute. She sold herself into slavery. In the same way, the people of Israel had sold themselves into doing just all sorts of things that they knew were wrong and trapping themselves in this cycle. Then in chapter 3, we have what some scholars describe as the greatest chapter in the Bible. In it, God tells Hosea to go and find Gomer. Wherever she is, go and find her and bring her back. And so when Hosea finds Gomer, he finds her in prostitution and he buys her back. This is a fantastic picture that we see played out in the New Testament when Jesus pays the price for our wrongdoings, for our disobedience, for us determining to do the things our way, and Jesus paying our debt so that we can be brought back into God's family. And then in chapter 4, we have a series of proclamations by Hosea against the people of Israel. He turns lawyer and he charges the people of Israel with doing several things wrong against God. The first one was that they lost their passion for God. They stopped learning about God. They stopped trying to find out about God, and they were just going through the motions. The next one was they'd stopped putting their trust in God. Instead, they had made treaties with other nations, and they were putting their trust in those treaties. In fact, those treaties didn't mean anything, because it was those nations that then came and conquered Israel later on. And finally, they had diluted their faith by making the faith and their worship of God just one of the things that they were worshipping in their life. And so then in chapters 8 and 9, we have Hosea talking about how Israel have sown destruction, and so they're going to reap trouble. There's that famous saying, they're going to reap a whirlwind. And that comes from from those chapters. Then in chapters 10, 11, 12, we have Israel being compared to a son and God being compared to a father, so a change up of the relationship. And then in chapters 13 and 14, we have God changing it around and saying, if you come back to me, if you come back, I will be able to pour out so much blessing on you, and you will be my people again. On the surface, Hosea looks like a bit of a brutal book, using a man's broken family as an example of God's broken relationship with his people. But actually, throughout the book, there is this heartbeat that not only does God want our obedience, but actually he wants a loving, personal relationship with you. That he wants the church of God to be his bride. And that is what we will be. And that's just amazing. And I love the fact that when you read Hosea, you hear the heartbreaks and the musical notes of the New Testament throughout the whole book. Of God's grace, of his mercy, of his compassion. My key verse for you is found in Hosea chapter 14, right at the end of the book, and in verse 4. And God is saying, if you come back to me, this is what I will do. I will heal your waywardness and love them freely, for my anger has been turned away. I will be like the dew to Israel. He will blossom like a lily in a field, like a cedar of Lebanon. He will send down his roots, and his young shoots will grow. His splendor will be like an olive tree, and his fragrance like the cedar of Lebanon. So just think about those words then. If we come back to God, if we stop fighting God, stop trying to do things our way, but just submit to him, submit to his lordship over our lives, and allow him to do his work in our lives, this is what he promises he will do. He will heal us. He will love us. He will turn away his anger. He will help us to have just great splendor and fragrance, and be able just to shine a light. You know that verse in Matthew 5 that says, you are the light of the world. People will see your good deeds and praise the Father in heaven, and he will give you all you need. You know, it says here in verse 6 that you will shoot down your roots into the ground and be like the mighty cedars of Lebanon. You know, God wants to plant you right where you are. God wants to give you all that you need. He wants to help you to be able to succeed in life and to be able to thrive. All we need to do is submit to him. Come back to that loving relationship that God has for us. And that is the book of Hosea.